What happened when you finally reach a breaking point, and how it ended? My name is Adrian Lewis. I'm 25 years old, and for the past year, I've worked as an administrative assistant at Golden Summit Enterprises, a mid-sized logistics company. I spend my days buried in spreadsheets, managing payroll data, and processing employee records. It's the kind of job that most people would consider dull, but for someone like me, a detail-oriented person with a knack for numbers, it's not so bad. Or at least, it wasn't at first. I didn't grow up imagining myself in a cubicle, but after graduating college with a degree in accounting, I needed a foot in the door. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was enough to cover my student loans and rent for the tiny apartment I share with my cat, Milo. I kept my head down, worked hard, and tried not to make waves. That's what they want from people like me: silent, efficient, and invisible. But sometimes, invisibility lets you see things other people can't. The company Golden Summit Enterprises is one of those companies that prides itself on being family-oriented. They plaster slogans about teamwork and loyalty all over the office walls, but anyone who works there knows it's just for show. The CEO, Mr. Randall Mason, loves to boast about how the company grew from nothing into a regional powerhouse, but he never mentions the turnover rate or the whispers of unfair treatment. We have about 300 employees, most of them drivers and warehouse workers. They're the backbone of the company, working long hours to make sure deliveries go out on time. Meanwhile, the office staff like me handles the paperwork and keeps the gears turning. At first, I didn't notice much beyond the usual office politics and corporate nonsense. But after a few months, I started seeing things that didn't add up. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, I was reconciling payroll records when I noticed a discrepancy. Several of the drivers' overtime hours weren't reflected in their paychecks. At first, I thought it was a simple clerical error. I flagged it and brought it up to my supervisor Karen. She waved it off, saying it was just a glitch in the system and that it would get sorted out next cycle. But it didn't. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding more glitches. Overtime hours weren't being paid, bonuses for meeting performance targets were mysteriously absent, and several employees had deductions on their paychecks that didn't make sense. Every time I brought it up, Karen gave me the same rehearsed answer: "Don't worry about it." That's when I started digging. I stayed late after work, poring over months of payroll records. The deeper I went, the worse it got. The company wasn't just shortchanging a few employees, it was systematic. Drivers were being denied overtime pay, warehouse workers were being charged for equipment they didn't break, and immigrant employees, who were too scared to speak up, were being paid under the table at below minimum wage. What shocked me most was how deliberate it all was. These weren't mistakes. This was a system designed to exploit the most vulnerable workers while keeping the higher-ups' pockets full. I couldn't ignore what I'd found. But the question was, what could I do about it? I knew reporting it internally would be pointless. Karen was in on it, and she answered directly to Mr. Mason. If I spoke up, they'd bury the issue, and probably me along with it. I'd seen what happened to people who crossed Mason. A warehouse manager had been fired last year for performance issues after he tried to organize a meeting about unsafe working conditions. So, I made a choice. I wouldn't go through the company, I'd go around it. I started compiling evidence, payroll discrepancies, email threads, even photos of warehouse equipment that didn't meet safety standards. I kept everything on a flash drive that I carried with me everywhere. At the same time, I researched labor laws and whistleblower protections. One night, I found the perfect outlet, a local investigative journalist named Sophie Martinez, who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. I reached out to her anonymously, explaining what I'd found. I didn't sign my name. I didn't want recognition, I just wanted someone to listen. A week later, Sophie emailed me back. She was interested. For the next month, I worked with her in secret. I sent her everything I had: documents, emails, even voice recordings I'd taken during meetings where Karen and Mason joked about how easy it was to trim the fat. Sophie dug deeper, interviewing current and former employees, piecing together the story. The day the article dropped, the entire company went into panic mode. The headline was brutal: Golden Summit Enterprises exploits workers, a whistleblower story. The article laid out everything: the wage theft, the unsafe conditions, the illegal treatment of immigrant workers. Sophie had even managed to interview a few brave employees who confirmed my evidence. The backlash was immediate. Within days, the Department of Labor announced an investigation. The company's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments, and several clients cut ties with Golden Summit to avoid being associated with the scandal. Mason tried to deny everything at first, calling the article a hit piece and claiming the accusations were baseless. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Department of Labor uncovered even more violations during their investigation, and Mason was forced to settle with the employees. The company had to pay millions in back wages, fines, and damages. As for me, I kept my head down and stayed anonymous. Sophie respected my decision to remain unnamed in her article. I knew that if anyone found out I was the whistleblower, I'd lose my job and probably never work in this field again. Golden Summit Enterprises limped along for a few more months before declaring bankruptcy. Mason resigned in disgrace, and Karen disappeared from the office one day without a word. Where I am now looking back, I don't regret what I did. I didn't get a medal or a promotion, but that was never the point. The point was to stand up for the people who couldn't stand up for themselves, even if I had to do it from the shadows. These days, I'm working at a nonprofit that advocates for workers' rights. It doesn't pay as much as Golden Summit did, but it feels like I'm finally doing something that matters. Sometimes, I think about the people I worked with, the drivers, the warehouse staff, and wonder if they ever guessed it was me. Maybe they did. Or maybe I'm just a footnote in their story. And that's okay. Because the truth came out, and that's what really matters.
Like and subscribe.